Good day, everybody. I am Mary Grace Balatero. I will discuss the international issues. First, before I proceed on my topic, let me ask you first. Why do we have international issues? Ano ba yung sino ba nag-address nito? Bakit tayo meron ganito as in the Philippines? So, matatakal natin yan as we go along. These are the topics na naka-assign sa akin. So, the international issues are children, human rights, aging, population, and decolonization. First, children. Bakit nga ba nakasama yung mga bata sa international issues? May mga karapatan ba sila? May mga in-address ba yung United Nations about sa kanila? So, let's see. So, generally, children refers to a minor. Otherwise, it is known as younger than the age of majority. They have fewer rights and less responsibilities than adults. They are classed as unable to make serious decisions and legally must be under the care of their parents or another responsible caregiver. So kahit pa sinapupunan ka pa ng yung nanay, meron ka ng karapatan bilang tao or bilang mabubuhay na isang tao. So, according to United Nations, meron silang dineclare na rights of the child. In 1959, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Declaration of the Rights of the Child, which defines children's right to protect, to educate, have health care, shelter, and good nutrition. So, UNICEF, or United Nations International Children's Emergencies Fund, expanded its interest to address the needs of the whole child. Thus began abiding concern with education, starting with support for teacher training and classroom equipment in newly independent countries. In 1965, the organization was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize for the promotion of brotherhood among nations. Today, UNICEF works in more than 190 countries and territories, focusing special effort on reaching the most vulnerable and excluded children to the benefit of all children everywhere. So, as I remembered, last 2019, bago mag-pandemic, meron tayong NSTP. May seminar tayo sa Mall of Asia Arena. Kasabay nun, kasama yung UNICEF sa diniscuss or sa pinakilala sa atin nun. Sa mga umattend, alam kong ma-remember niyo. Sa mga hindi naman umattend, God bless. So, yung UNICEF nga, isa sila sa mga tumutulong para i-organisa yung mga karapatan ng mga bata sa nutrition nila, sa medicines, sa education, especially educations, and of course yung mga right nila, 'di ba? Yung marami sa ating mga bata ngayon na nababiolate na yung karapatan nila bilang isang bata kahit pa meron tayong batas, 'di ba? Yun yung mga human rights kasama yung, 'di ba? So yung United Nations, etong United Nations, not just in Asia or in the Philippines, it is the whole world, 'di ba? Nabanggit ko kanina, 'di ba pinangaralan nga sila ng Nobel Peace Prize for promotion of brotherhood among nations. So, meron na silang 190 countries and territories na natulungan or na-reach out para sa mga bata. So, Convention of the Rights of the Child, declared in 1989, the convention is the most rapidly and widely ratified international human rights treaty in history. The convention changed the way children are viewed and treated as human beings in a distinct set of rights instead as passive objects of care and charity. The unprecedented acceptance of the convention clearly shows a wide global commitment to advancing children's rights. So, see, kahit pa dati na wala tayong children's rights, maraming bata yung mga hindi natatrato ng maayos. So, nagkaroon sila ng madaming karapatan para sa mga bata. Kasi nga, di ba nabanggit dito, na yung mga bata hindi sila naaalagaan ng maayos. Walang pagmamalasakad sa kanila kahit pa noon at kahit pa hanggang ngayon. Kaya ngayon yung goal nila, 'di ba? Na even though na meron tayong rights, dapat mas pahalaganapin pa natin. Yun yung ginagawa ng UNICEF. State of the world's children. Children yan. Poverty affects children disproportionately. Around the world, 1 out of 5 children lives extremely poverty, living on the less than $1.90 a day. Their families struggle to afford the basic healthcare and nutrition needed to provide them a strong start. This deprivation leave a lasting imprint. In 2019, 149 million children under the age of 5 were stunted. So ano ba yung mga karapatan ng mga bata? Una-una, nag-struggle sila sa kahirapan. Yung mga parents nila, hindi sila kayang pakainin ng parang less than 3 times a day or more. Wala silang basic healthcare needs. Educations, tirahan. Yun yung mga ginagather na needs ng mga bata ngayon, di ba? Ito yung mga pinagdadaanan ng mga bata around the world. So, despite progress, high school enrollment in many parts of the world, more than 175 million children are not enrolled in pre-primary education, missing critical investment opportunity and suffering deep inequalities from the start. So, di ba, hindi naman lahat ng mga, hindi naman halos lahat ng mga bata nakapag-aral, especially preschool. Di ba? Kasi nga, yun nga, tapos, walang maayos na funds for education. 6 out of 10 leave primary school without achieving minimum proficiency levels in reading and mathematics. According to 2017 UNESCO report, these challenges compounded by the increasing protracted nature of armed conflict. Kasi nga, isa dito sa mga nawawalan ng rights yung mga bata na instead na makapag-aral sila, because of kapos, wala silang right, sapat na pera para makapag-aral, na pipilitan sila magtrabaho. Katulad nung sa province natin, yung mga tatay nila, magsasaka lang yung trabaho, nanay nila, labandera lang. Minsan, pumadami sila sa pamilya, like 12 yung anak, nawawalan sila ng di ba, ng funds para makapag-aral, imbis na makapag-aral sila, itutulong na lang sila sa parents nila. Kasi ganun sila ka-helpful sa parents nila. Mas napipilitan silang pumunta sa trabaho, maghanap ng mga pera, kaysa sa pag-aaral o pumunta sa school. So, dahil doon, dumadami yung percent ng mga batang hindi nakakapag-aral. Hindi marunong magbasa, nalilate sila sa edad nila. So, we are children, not soldiers. Sabi nga dyan, di ba? Wait, wala na. Children in armed conflict. More than 20 years ago, the world united to condemn and mobilize against the use of children in armed conflict. Since then, thousands of children have been released as a result of action plans mandated by the UN Security Council and other actions aimed at ending and preventing recruitment and use of children by armed forces and groups However, serious challenges for the protection of child affected by armed conflict remain. Violence against children. The right of children to protection from violence is enriched in the Convention of the Rights of the Child, and yet still 1 billion children experience some form of emotional, physical, sexual violence every year. And one child dies from violence every 5 minutes. Isipin mo yun? In 5 minutes, meron namamatay na bata na may isang batang namamatay sa violence. Di ba? Nakakabahala talaga siya. Yun yung mga nabanggit ko kanina sa Convention Rights of Child. Bakit merong karapatan yung mga bata? Even though meron na sila, di ba, even though meron na silang karapatan, still, nag-violent pa rin sila. That is why, hindi ganun ka-educate yung mga tao ngayon. Kaya, kailangan ng mga government, help ng government, agencies, departments, ng tulong para ipalaganap or spread, diba, yung kaalaman about children's rights. So, zero violence against children by 2030. Yan yung goal ng United Nations. By 2030, sana wala ng mga batang na-violent or nawawala ng karapatan. In 2006, the UN study provided a set of recommendations on how to end violence against children. And the Secretary General appointed a special representative to ensure the effective follow-up and to monitor implementations. So, during 2006 pa pala ito, yung Secretary General ng United Nations, nag-recommend na siya, paano nga ba matitigil yung pag-violent ng violations ng karapatan ng mga bata. So, minomonitor na nila yon from 2006 up to now and to the future, paano yun ma-implement or mapapahinto. There has been some real progress. Many states now have legislation to prohibit physical, mental, and sexual violence support victims. Campaigns are raising awareness of the negative impact of violence and bullying. Sexual violence and harmful practices against children are being tackled. So, United Nations has progress. Meron na silang report. Diba? Yung other states, nagkaroon na sila ng prohibit, diba? For physical, mental, sexual violations or support victims campaigns para sa mga bata, para suportahan sila for bilang sila rights of children. So, unless the world tackles inequity today in 2030, diba, 167 million children will live in extreme poverty. 52 million children under age 5 will die between 2019 and 2030. 60 million children of primary school age will be out of school. See, yung plan nila, yung, what do we call it? Data na natakal nila is for 2030 pa. So, ilang year pa yun, ilang tulog pa na proclaim na nila agad kung ano yung mga mangyayari. Children and the Sustainable Development Goals. For 15 years, the Millennium Development Goals were a guiding force on many issues affecting the lives of children, young people, and their families. Over this time, tremendous progress was made in reducing preventable child deaths, getting more children into school, reducing extreme poverty, and ensuring more people have access to safe water and nutritious food. So, according to Millennium Development Goals or MDGs, ayan yung mga issues kung bakit issues sa buhay ng mga bata and their families, diba? Yun yung children's death, yung mga batang hindi nakakapasok ng school, and yung pati yung pag-inom at saka yung nutritious food nila, nandyan din. Children and the UN system. From the focus on educational of the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization or UNESCO, to the efforts of International Labor Organization or ILO to abolish child labor, to the Children and the Youth Program of the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine, Refugees in the Near East or UNRWA, to the World Food Program or WFP, to disease eradication campaigns of the World Health Organization. The United Nations system is there for children. So, sa nabasa ko, ito yung mga programs, organizations, diba? Governments na pwedeng tumulong sa mga batang nababiolent. Yun nga yung UNESCO or yung United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, yung ILO, or yung International Labor Organization. Ito yung, di ba yung karapatan pag nagpapalaglag ng bata, yan, may karapatan, may ano din yan, may rights din yan. Yung, ano din? Children and Youth Program of the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, or yung UNRW. Yan. Provided yan yung mga nutritional work. Yung World Food Program, or yung about health naman, yung World Health Organization. So lahat natatakil at pwedeng i-organize na mga organizations for children, ginawa nila. Up to now, meron sila. Next issues is human rights. So, madami siyang, human rights nga so madaming karapatan ang tao na hindi lahat alam kasi hindi sapat yung kaalaman nila for this right. Kaya yung mga tao, yung mga organization, the government itself, nag-organize sila ng mga programs para awareness sa ating mga tao kung ano nga ba yung karapatan mo bilang ikaw. Diba yung hindi lang basta-basta natatapakan ka, hindi lang basta-basta nababiolent ka, meron kang karapatan para ipagtanggol yung sarili mo. So, human rights are rights inherent to all human beings. Diba? Regardless kung race, sex, nationality, ethnicity, kung ano bang language mo, anong religion, or other status na meron ka. Diba, May? Human rights include the right to life and liberty. Karapatan mong mabuhay. Freedom from slavery and torture. Freedom of opinion and expression. The right to work and education, and many more. Everyone is entitled to these rights without discriminations. So, ito nga, yung human, di ba nowadays madaming nababiolent? Kasi nga kahit na may human rights tayo na tinatawag, still nababiolent pa rin naman sila, especially mga babae. Madaming nare-rape, nabubugbog, napapatay, di ba? Yung mga kasi meron tayong discrimination, especially yung mga LGBTs. Madami nababiolent na yung mga karapatan nila bilang tao kasi nga daw ang tao, ang Panginoon, ang ginawa niya lang lalaki at babae, hindi kasama yung bakla, tomboy. You know what I mean? 'Di ba? So, nakakaumay na lang siya na marinig every single day as we talked about human rights. Kasi yun talaga yung mga nangyayari nowadays sa ating mundo. International Human Rights Law lays down the obligations of governments to act in certain ways or refrain from certain acts in order to promote and protect human rights and fundamental freedoms of individuals or groups. By the foundation of this body of law are the Charter of the United Nations and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the General Assembly in 1945 and 1948. So, international human rights law naglagay sila ng obligation sa mga governments na, di ba, to, sundin and to promote and to protect human rights and fundamental freedoms of individuals or groups. So it declares by General Assembly in 1945 and 1948. United Nations has gradually expanded human rights law to encompass specific standards for women, children, persons with disabilities, minorities, and other vulnerable groups who now possess rights that protect them from discrimination that had long been common in many societies. So, as you can see or as you observe in our daily lives, yung mga karaniwan na nababiolate ngayon is yung mga bata, yung mga babae, yung mga persons with disabilities. Ayan, yan sila yung mga karaniwan na nababiolate yung mga rights nila, especially in the Philippines, di ba? Kung sino pa yung mga kumpleto, di ba, maayos, feeling perfect, sila yung laging nagjo-judge, di ba? So, dapat napoprotektahan natin sila. Dapat lahat balance lang, lahat pantay-pantay. There is no discriminations, di ba, in the world. Kasi wala namang ginawa si Lord na, ay ito dapat mataas, ay ito mababa lang, ganun. Pantay lang dapat. So, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So, ito yung mga ginawa nila na rights for international global. Universal Declaration of Human Rights, yan. May mga na siya, salin para mas maintindihan ng ibang country nakasama sa United Nations. So, Asia, diba, Africa, Europe, kasama yan. Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a milestone document in the history of human rights, drafted by representatives with different legal and cultural backgrounds from all regions of the world. Declaration was proclaimed by the United Nations General Assembly in Paris on December 10, 1948 by General Assembly Resolution 2178, third, as a common standard of achievements of all people and all nations. The UDHR, together with the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and its two optional protocols on the complaints procedure on the death penalty and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights and its optional protocol, form the so-called International Bill of Human Rights. Next is Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. So, dito nga sa human rights, lahat talaga tinatakal as in. So, whether sa religion, sa culture, o sa language, kung ano mang meron ka na nababiolate mo as person, as a human, so meron talagang karapatan. So, Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights entered into force in the 1976. The human rights the covenant seeks to promote and protect include, so, the right to work in just and favorable conditions. Diba, hindi ka naman pwede mag-work na talagang diretso lang talaga. Siyempre, merong specific na time. Diba, kung dito, meron tayong, kunyari, 8 to 6. Diba? Parang 48 hours ba? Or 8 hours in a day. 8 hours in a day. So, yun yung pinopromote talaga ng human rights. Kasi hindi naman talaga makatao kung buong araw ka magtatrabaho. And isa pa, with, bakit nakalagay doon, conditions. Siyempre, dapat merong benefits. Katulad dito sa ating bansa, meron tayong SSS, pag-ibig, PhilHealth. Dapat meron talaga yun. Kasi kung wala, talagang mapapasara talaga yung agency kung ano mang meron kayo. Ngayon kasi, sa mga nababalitaan ko, yung mga tao na merong ganito is, parang issues about that is, mga OFW, mga
Illegal.
constructual, parang, lang sila, parang, hindi masyado yung, yan, yung mga contractual, hindi masyadong naasikaso yung mga papers nila. Kasi nga napapabayaan, hindi naasikaso.
Illegal.
So, illegal yun. Next is the right to social protection, to an adequate standard of living and to the highest attainable standards of physical and mental well-being. Next is the right to education and the enjoyment of benefits of cultural freedom and scientific progress. Civil and political rights. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and its first optional protocol entered into force in 1976. The second optional protocol was adopted in 1989. The covenant deals with such rights as freedom of movement, equality before the law, the right to fair trials and presumption of innocence, freedom of thought, conscience and religion, freedom of opinion and expression, peace assembly, freedom of association, participation in public affairs and elections, protection of minority rights. It prohibits arbitrary deprivations of life, torture, cruel and degrading treatment of punishment, slavery and forced labor, arbitrary arrest of detention, arbitrary interference with privacy, war propaganda, discrimination, and advocacy of racial or religious hatred. So, yung mga nabanggit ko, yun yung mga rights sa civil and political rights. So, syempre sa atin, di ba, tayo, that monarchy and democracy. So, nasa democratic, tayo, country tayo. So, meron tayong karapatan to have an express ourselves, ba? Yung magbigay ng opinions, kahit naman hindi na kailangan. So, may freedom tayo about that. Nakalagay dito, equality before the law. Diba? Equality. Diba? Hindi mo kailangan ng, kasi sa law, madami na nakalagay doon, kumbaga ang dami na naka-address doon. So, before yon dapat equal mo na lahat. Walang mahirap, walang mayaman, walang dahil nasa gobyerno ka, nagtatrabaho ka sa mayor, sa presidente, walang ganon, lahat pantay. Pero ngayon kasi, sa Pilipinas, medyo hindi siya uso. Kasi, di ba, naman, kapag may pera ka, doon ka lang may hustisya. Totoo talaga yung kanta ni Bambo na Tagsulok. Kasi kung sino lang yung mga nasa taas, kung sino lang yung may pera, may kapangyarihan, may kakayahan na ipagtanggol sa sarili nila, yun lang yung nakakamit yun lang yung may privilege na makakuha ng justice. But of course, marami namang ahensya, especially yung marami namang tao na tumutulong about sa mga mahihirap like Rapi Tulfo. Marami tumutulong siya about sa mga service ng mga tao, yung mga kailangan ng justice, lumalapit sa program niya para manghingi ng tulong, know about the rights, gano'n. Human Rights Convention, a series of international human rights treaties and other instruments adopted since 1945 have expanded the body of international human rights law. They include the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, 1948, the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination in 1965, the Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women in 1979, the Convention of the Rights of the Child in 1989, ang haba, and the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2006, and among others. Ang dami ng human rights. Hihingal ako. Human Rights Council, established in March 15, 2006, General Assembly and reporting directly to it replaced the 60-year-old UN Commission of Human Rights as the key UN intergovernmental body responsible for human rights. The council is made of 47 state representatives and is tasked with strengthening the promotion and protection of human rights around the globe by addressing situations of human rights violations and making recommendations on them, including responding on human rights emergencies. So, itong Human Rights Council, sila yung mga nag-update, gumagawa ng data, ng research about global, around the world, kung sino man yung mga naka-address sa globalization. Yun yung mga countries na ginagawa nila ng update for responding, kung ano ba yung mga rights emergencies na kailangan ilagay, diba? Meron sila. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights exercises principal responsibility for UN human rights activities. The High Commissioner is mandated to respond to serious violations of human rights and to undertake prevention action. The Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, OHCHR, is the focal point for United Nations human rights activities. It serves as the Secretariat for the Human Rights Council, the treaty bodies, expert committees that monitor treaty compliance, and other UN human rights organs. It also undertakes human rights field activities. So, dito sa UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, ito yung mga, binanggit nila dito yung mga organizations na tumututok, nagpo-focus about these rights. So, meron tayo OHCHR o yung High Commissioner for Human Rights. Human rights in the UN system. Human rights is a cross-cutting theme in all UN policies and programs in the key areas of peace and security, development, humanitarian assistance, and economic and social affairs. As a result, virtually every UN body and specialized agency is involved to some degree in the protection of human rights. Some examples are the right to development, which is the core of the Sustainable Development Goals, the right of food, championed by the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, labor rights, defined and protected by the International Labor Organization, gender equality, which is promulgated by UN Women, the rights of children, indigenous peoples, and disabled persons. So, human rights is observed every December 10. Yun yung parang day para as human rights. Parang sinicelebrate. Hindi ko alam kung celebration ba yung tawag doon about human rights. But yeah, December 10.
Human Rights Day.
Next, pangatlo ng issues is yung aging. Yung mga mabilis sa pagtanda. Population aging is poised to become one of the most significant social transformations of the 21st century, with implications for nearly all sectors of society, including labor and financial markets, the demand for goods and services, such as housing, transportation, social protection, as well as family structures and nation styles. Older persons are increasingly seen as contributors to development whose abilities to act for the betterment of themselves and their society should be woven into policies and programs at all levels. In the coming decades, many countries are likely to face fiscal and political pressures in relation to public system of healthcare, pension, and social protection for growing older population. So, kung yung nauna, meron tayong children's right, merong human rights, ito naman yung mga older rights, yung para sa mga matatanda, kung ano ba yung mga benefits na kailangan nila. matanggap, di ba? Kunyari, pensions, mga healthcares, yan, yung mga dapat kailangan ng mga matatanda. Social protections din pwede. Demographic drivers of population aging. The size and age condition of population are determined jointly by three demographic processes: fertility, mortality, and migration. All regions have experienced substantial increases in life expectancy since 1950. As the life expectancy at birth increases, improvements in survival at older ages account for growing proportion of the overall improvement in longevity. Longevity. In 1991, the General Assembly adopted the United Nations Principle for Older Persons, enumerating aid and entitlements for older persons relating to independence, participation, care, self-fulfillment, and dignity. The following year, the International Conference on Aging met to follow up on the plan of action, adopting a proclamation on aging. Following the conference recommendation, the UN General Assembly declared in 1999 the International Year of Older Persons. The International Day of Older Persons is celebrated on October 1 every year. So lahat yon, madaming parang holidays pag sa atin. Madaming pinoclaim na day yung mga para sa mga matatanda. Next, action on behalf on the aging continued in 2002 when the Second World Assembly on Aging was held in Madrid, aiming to design international policy on aging for the 21st century. It adopted a political declaration and the Madrid International Plan of Action in Aging. The plan, Potential of Aging in the 21st Century, specific recommendations for action, give priority to older person and development, advancing health and well-being into old age, and ensuring and enabling supportive environments. So dito sa aging, binanggit dito yung mga yung mga independence, participation, mga kailangan ng mga seniors natin dito. Kahit pa matanda sila, kailangan mas protected pa din natin sila. Kasi, syempre, nung mga bata tayo, sino ba nag-alaga sa atin? Di ba sila rin? So, it's time to give back. Kung ano bang rights ang meron sa kanila, dapat ibigay. Especially, here in the Philippines, protected talaga yan sila. Especially sa health nila, paano nila alagaan yung sarili nila, sa mga kailangan sa mga pension, retirements, yan, para sa pagtanda nila, as they grow, para sa, bago man lang sila mamatay, di ba, magkaroon sila ng kaginhawaan sa sarili nila. Next is population. In 1950, 5 years after the founding of the United Nations, world population was estimated at around 2.6 billion people. It reached 5 billion in 1987 and 6 billion in 1999. In October 2011, the global population was estimated to be 7 billion. The global movement 7 Billion Actions was launched to mark this milestone. The world's population expected to increase by 2 billion persons in the next 30 years. So from 7.7 billion currently to 9.7 billion in 2050. Isipin mo yun, yung mundo natin, kaya pala madaming tao na gustong lumipat ng Mars. Parang iba na yung gusto nilang makasama, hindi na tao. And could peak at nearly 11 billion around 2000, Parang to 2,100. This dramatic growth has been driven largely by increasing numbers of people surviving to reproductive age and has been accompanied by major changes in the fertility rates, increasing urbanization, acceleration, migration. These trends will have far-reaching implications for generation to come. Paano pa naman hindi dadami yung mga tao ngayon? Diyos ka, kung araw-araw may namamatay, parang 6 ata na bata may sinisilang sa isang araw. Or in 5 minutes. In seconds. Hindi natin sure. Most populated countries. Pinakamadaming tao. China and India. Winner!
Pero, kung makikita mo yung China.
Yes.
Develop yung ano sila.
Dito ka. 61% of the global population lives in Asia. 17% in Africa. Sa Asia, meron tayong 4.7 billion. So, talo pa rin tayo. Africa, 1.3 billion. Sa Europe, 750 million. Sa Latin America, 370 million. Sa Oceania, 43 million. Sorry, sa China, 1.44 billion. Tsaka sa, konti na lang. Pero mas madami yung China than India kasi yung India 1.39 billion. Remain to these two largest countries of the world, both with more than 1 billion people representing 19 and 18% of the world's population, respectively. Around 2027, India is projected to overtake China as the world's most populous country, while China's population is projected to decrease by 31.4 million or around 2.2% between 2019 and 2050. So, source to from World Population Prospects of in 2019, last year. Yeah. Ito yung yung world population, projected world population till 2,100. Padami ng padami. So, the world population is projected to reach 8.5 billion in 2030 and to increase further to 9.7 in 2050 and 11.2 billion by 2,100. 2,100. As with any type of projection, there is a degree of uncertainty surrounding these latest population projections. These figures are based on the medium projection variant, which assumes a decline of fertility for countries where large families are still prevalent, as well as slight increase of fertility in several countries with fewer than 2 children per woman on average. Survival prospects are also projected to improve in all countries, especially in the Philippines. Hindi pa rin uso sa ating mga Pilipino ang family planning. So, late na sila nag-family planning ng mga, narealize nilang 3 na yung anak nila. 6, 7, 12, tsaka sila nag-start ng family planning. So, magaling. So, kahit dumadami yung mga tao. Kasi nga, diba? Fastest growing continent, Africa. More than half of global population growth between now and the 2050 is expected to occur in Africa. Africa has the highest rate of population growth among major areas. The population of sub-Saharan Africa is projected to double by 2050. A rapid population increase in Africa is anticipated even if there is a substantial reduction of fertility levels in the near future, regardless of the uncertainty surrounding future trends in fertility in Africa. The large number of young people currently on the continent who will reach adulthood in the coming years and have children on their own ensures that the region will play a central role in shaping the size and distribution of the world's population over the coming decades. Shrinking population in Europe. In sharp contrast, the population of 55 countries or areas in the world are expected to decrease by 2050. of which 26 may see a reduction of the least 10%. Several countries are expected to see their population decline by more than 15% by 2050, including Bosnia and Herzegovina, Bulgaria, Croatia, Hungary, Japan, Latvia, Lithuania, Republic of Moldova, Romania, Serbia, and Ukraine. Fertility in all European countries is now below the level required for full replacement of the population in the long run. So, around 2.1 children per woman. And in the majority of the cases, fertility has been below and replacement level for several decades. Factors influencing the population growth. Una, ano ba yung mga factors na bakit tumataas yung population natin? Una, fertility rates. Future population growth is highly dependent on the path that future fertility will take. According to the World Population Prospects in 2019 revision, global fertility is projected to fall from 2.5 children per woman in 2019 to 2.2 in 2050. Good yan. Increasing longevity. Future population growth is highly dependent on the path that future fertility will take. According... Wait. Increasing longevity siya. Next, international migration. International migration is a much smaller component of population change than births or deaths. However, in some countries and areas, the impact of migration on populations of economic migrants and those affected by refugee flows between 2010 and 2020, 14 countries or areas will see a net inflow of more than 1 million migrants, while 10 countries will see a net outflow of similar magnitude. UN Population Division. The United Nations system has long been involved in addressing these complex and interrelated issues, notably through the work of the UN Population Fund or UNFPA and the UN Population Divisions. So yung UNFPA daw or yung United Nations Population Fund, sila yung mga nag-a-address about sa populations. Sila yung sila yung nag-response about that issues. And the UN Population Division. The Population Division pulls together information in such issues as international migration and development, urbanization, world population prospects and policies, and the marriage and fertility statistics. It supports UN bodies such as the Commission on Population and Development and supports implementations of program of actions adopted by the 1994 International Conference on Population and Development, or IPCD. Next, UN Population Fund. The UN Population Fund started operations in 1969 to assume leading role within the UN system promoting population programs based on the human rights of individuals and couples to freely determine the size of their families. In the International Conference on Population Development, its mandate was fleshed out in greater detail to give more emphasis to the gender and human rights dimensions of population issues. And UNFPA was given the lead role in helping countries carry out the conference program of action. The three key areas of UNFPA mandate are reproductive health, gender equality, and population and development. World Population Day is observed annually on July 11. It marks the date in 1987 when the world's population hit the 5 billion mark. So, yung Population Fund o yung UNFPA, sila yung mga tumutulong para mag-decrease yung population, paano i-address yung isang couple, isang marriage, about family planning. Kung ilan ba dapat yung i-address nila na maging anak. So, sila yung mga tumutulong about that. Oh. Next, decolonization. When the United Nations was founded in 1945, some 750 million people, nearly a third of world's population, live in territories that were dependent on colonial powers. Today, fewer than 2 million people live under colonial rule in the 17 remaining non-self-governing territories. The wave of decolonization, which changed the face of the planet, was born in the UN and represents the world body's first great success. As a result of decolonization, many countries became independent and joined the UN. The International Trusteeship System was established by UN Charter, affirming the principle of self-determination. The Charter describes the responsibility of states for the territories under their administration as a sacred trust in which the interests of their inhabitants are paramount. Trusteeship Council. The Charter also created the Trusteeship Council as a main organ of the United Nations. It was to monitor the situation in the 11 specific trust territories which were subject to separate agreements with administering states. These territories had been formally administered under mandates from the League of Nations or separated from countries defeated in the Second World War or voluntarily placed under the systems by their administering power. 11 territories were placed under this system. Declaration on the granting of independence to colonial countries and peoples. As the process of decolonization continued to advance, the General Assembly in 1960 adopted its landmark Declaration of Granting of Independence to Colonial Countries and Peoples. The declaration affirmed the right of people to self-determination and proclaimed that colonialism should be brought to a speedy and unconditional end. 2 years later, a special committee on decolonization was established to monitor its implementation. In 1990, the Assembly proclaimed the International Decade for the Eradication of Colonialism. From 1990 to 2000, which included a specific plan of action. In 2001, it was followed by Second International Decade for the Eradication of Colonialism. The end of Second Decade coincided with the 50th anniversary of the Declaration on the Granting of Independence to Colonial Countries and Peoples. At the same time, the General Assembly declared the period 2011 to 2020 the Third International Decade for the Eradication of Colonialism. Thank you.